Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people or wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you can be experimenting better. Welcome to The Experimental Leader, a podcast that takes a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own work. Hosted by Melanie Parrish, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist's mindset and experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something that works better. Join us on The Experimental Leader today.
Hey, it's great to be here live with you today. Super fun to be here. I've been thinking about my own leadership, and I've been thinking about where I try to remove bottlenecks. And, I have people I work with and people I do things with. And sometimes I start trying to remove bottlenecks as a leader. And I start doing things that impact the people I work with. So I get on a tear is the best way to say it. And I just start to try to move things forward. And I sometimes do things that I don't think things through, or someone will have been busy and not gotten back to me. So I start to try to move it through on my own. And I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I know I'm trying to remove a bottleneck, and I've gotten sort of fed up with being stuck. And so I start to do that. And then it has some unintended impact sometimes where, and I'm just going to say this didn't actually happen on my team, but it happened in my life. And I have an unintended impact with somebody who's also working on something that I wasn't able to think through when I started trying to remove bottlenecks. And I try to be as collaborative as possible. But I know as a leader, sometimes I do odd things when people don't get back to me. And so I'm just super curious if that's something that happens to you. And then how you think about it. Like, do you get immobilized because you can't ever move because people don't get back to you and you just let yourself be stuck? Or do you start to move and let the chips fall where they may and sort of, ask forgiveness rather than permission? Or do you just, as the leader, take the privilege that you have and just say, gosh, yeah, you could have gotten back to me and we would have had a better collaboration. I'm not sure there's a right answer for any situation. I'm not sure there's a right answer for me. I just notice that sometimes it happens and I notice my impact. And yet I'm not sure how I should do it differently all the time. I don't want to be immobilized as a leader, and I don't want to make my people respond to me if they're too busy, and I don't want to be left with bottlenecks. So I'm curious what your journey is. And my challenge to you this week is to just watch your impact and where you moving things has an impact on others. I want to just tell you, take a second, and I want to give you a really tool. I'm just going to start over. I just want to take a minute and I want to give you a really cool tool that I have that I share with people. And it's a reactive cheat sheet. And it helps you look at the reactive behaviors of yourself and others. You can get this completely free at reactivecheatsheet.experimentalleader.com. And I would love for you to have a copy. It's a good way to do a quick read. It's a good way to learn about your own leadership, where you might have some toxic behaviors, where other people have toxic behaviors, and there's some good foils to those. And I would love for you to have this in your arsenal. And today I am super excited to have Bant Breen on my podcast. Bant is a successful global marketing and media executive, entrepreneur, and academic. He's the executive chairman and founder of Qnary, an award-winning executive reputation management and talent branding solutions company. I am super excited to get to talk to Bant today. Bant, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Melanie. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I am super excited about this whole idea of reputation management. And tell me what, we'll just dive right in, but tell me
Sure.
what you're up to in your work and your leadership, and how are you experimenting in your life right now?
It was wonderful to hear, your preamble and your start to the show today, Melanie. One of the things that I think any leader has to think about is always experimenting, always reinventing, and making sure that you build that into the model of your company. And I'd give you an example about that. Over the last couple of years, our company focuses on the online presence for executives. I would imagine probably because as the world shifted more digital over the last couple of years, we grew like a weed. And so when you scale a company very quickly, you have to kind of manage time efficiently. How are you gonna what people are gonna do, et cetera. And um, as we were going into this year, I just saw that we were over allocating all of everybody in the company, and what we've done is we've pulled back and given them more time for innovation and development, because if that's one of the principles of the company, part of our culture, we need to make sure that we give people time to think, evolve, develop. And really, I think one of the biggest challenges for any company is once you figure out how to make the cookies, you got to make sure that that's the cookie that people are going to want to eat forever, and it's not going to be the cookie they want to eat forever. So therefore, you got to figure out how to evolve it constantly. And so I'm that annoying person in the company who's always kind of thinking about like what's going to be next and how do we make sure that how we prepare for that.
Well, and I'm sort of fascinated by the whole idea of innovation and reputation management. Like, just that really caught my attention. Can you say more about
Yeah,
what
sure.
innovation looks like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I came from the world of digital marketing. I used to manage a lot of big brands online, and certainly companies are spending more and more money in the digital area, digital channels. However, one of the things that I had noticed is that executives, whilst their lives were becoming more and more dependent on how people found information about them or their companies online, were actually not spending much time in really making the most of their own online presence.
Mhm.
And so, our business was founded on a relatively simple thesis, which is that, you as a professional, your online presence matters. It matters in terms of the opportunities that you're going to receive as an individual, as well as the opportunities your business will receive. And then it'll also impact the reputation of your business, as well as the reputation, your reputation. And we've only seen that grow over the last 10 years as the world has become even more digital. And so we support individuals. I would say that one of the things that really always stands out to me is it's so hard for a brand to build a direct conversation with a customer.
Mm.
And the reason, for years I was kind of thinking like, oh, well, it's because the messaging's not right, or, as a brand, as a marketer would. And, about halfway through the lifespan of Qnary so far, it just dawned on me, which is people like to talk to people. Humans like to talk to humans. We want to be, we trust one another more than we would trust a brand. Let's put it that way.
Mm.
And we trust one another more than we trust a company, right? Or an institution, and so it's no surprise when I see things like our posts for executive getting 13, 14, 15 times more engagement than something that would be done by a brand. It's because people interact with people, right? And put technology aside for a second and just think about yourself and your own life. Who
Mm.
influences you? Who do you want to hear from? How do you want to think about things? It's people, right? So
Well, I think it's really interesting, and I work with my clients on what's their leadership brand,
mhm.
which is sort of finding a space in the marketplace where they can hold space,
Right.
whatever that is. And I'm sure you do something, you do some of that sort of visioning as well. But it's not, the next step is to take it out into the world. So
Yeah.
mine is more, sort of how they think of themselves. But I really see the need for that because
I love that work that you guys that you do. I mean, I would say that executives that spend a little bit of time on that work are always our best clients, our best
Mhm.
customers, because they understand themselves. The biggest thing we always say to executives is that, as you move up the ladder of a company and you become a leader, you are doing many different things, and you probably feel entitled or able to speak to multiple topics.
Yeah.
Albeit, what we highly recommend is for executives to really kind of focus their voice around a smaller group of topics, because in today's world, you're really not going to break through if you're just kind of generally commenting on the zeitgeist of the day, unless you're a celebrity, right?
Mhm.
And that's a different type of objective. Sometimes you come across leaders that want to be celebrities, and that's kind of a different strategy.
Yeah, it's and I think about, I know cold. You could wake me up in the middle of the night and I know what I love about my work. Like I know what
Mhm.
I do. I help people love their work. That's always my goal. I want to remove all the bottlenecks so that they can find fulfillment in their work. And it doesn't matter. I mean, they have to be able to afford me in order for me to work with them in an ongoing way. But I would be happy to do that for a mechanic. I would
Mhm.
be happy to do that for a waitress. I would be happy to do that for a CEO in a company, because that's sort of what I want to bring to the world. And I think there's like how do you want to make yourself successful? And then there's the fulfillment piece for yourself.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a really
Yeah,
interesting.
it's really beautiful. I would say that we are kind of a tactic for you, in the
Yes.
sense that we would take what you do, and then we're trying to give it a voice. Probably deep down in my own personal philosophy as a in human being is that we spend you have a very small group of people that get a lot of voice in our society, and a
Mhm.
lot of mind share in our society, and yet there are thousands, if not millions, of people that are just tremendous experts and wonderful people. And I really believe that part of my goal and my purpose in life is to try to find a way to give them a bit more of a voice. So,
Mm.
or
I love that.
yeah.
I really love that. And I think it's so important. Sometimes we hear about sort of authenticity when things go wrong, and that just popped into my head. I'm
Mhm.
curious, sort of what you generally advise when things go wrong for someone. How do they manage their reputation when they're working
Mhm.
for a company and something goes wrong?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is don't wait till you're having a crisis. That's the first thing I would say.
Got it.
The individuals that are active are the ones that have built a digital footprint that can help them manage themselves through a crisis. Now, when crises happen, um, the old way of communications philosophy was always go silent, don't say anything. Maybe you'll get something from the head of PR that will be a statement that the CEO will supposedly have said, and it will be released. We think that that's just a horrible strategy today.
Mm.
Today, the world is so transparent. The expectation that we as individuals and as consumers, and every CEO that's a customer has this expectation of immediate gratification, and people want to know what's going on, and they want people to take accountability for their actions or for a challenge that they're facing. The individuals that over the last couple of years that were more open about their challenges during the pandemic were rewarded for being
Right.
open about that. The individuals that kind of demanded that their workers go back to the office, or fired people. I think there's obviously the famous case study of the guy individual, I think at better.com, that fired 950 people on a Zoom call. I mean, just so inhumane, and it's so tone deaf. And it's not that the guy didn't have to do it. It's not that the company didn't need to make those tough decisions. But wow, what a horrible way of doing it, and what a way of not really putting it into a broader context. So,
And I know I'm going to just tell you one of the things I grapple with, and get your take on it, since you're here and I'm here.
mhm.
I've been a solopreneur for a really long time. And then as
Mhm.
I've built a brand around the experimental leader, I think it's exactly what you're talking about the voice of the brand and me as the leader and the face of the brand. And so I always struggle about, which one to give more attention to in our messaging. Should it all be me? Because then what happens if I get hit by a bus? And should it all be the company? No, probably not. And so I just am curious if you have any, quick insights
Mhm.
for us about how we think about that. Because I think that's a really common problem for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and as an entrepreneur, you've got to. My honest advice is that as an entrepreneur, you've got to do everything you possibly can to break through. And so no one's going to do you any favors.
Yeah.
Um, and to be honest with you, you don't have the budgets to compete with the big companies that are going to be pouring media dollars to get their own things noticed. And so when I would look at the channels, that your channels, I would look at the ones that can help you the most.
Mm.
And certainly I would kind of put the ones that can drive the most, and use the other ones as support channels, and vice versa. They should be kind of playing a bit of a halo role on each other, right? So your personal channels should have a halo effect on the brand. The brand should have a halo effect on your personal channels. And I would say that for almost, really all entrepreneurs, you can't be tone deaf to your customers. You have to engage with your customers. You have to figure out a strategy of how to do that. You don't need to be doing that across every channel. You can select the channels that you really want to make sure are those channels. But today, in a world where where quality is like empathy, openness, equality, you just have to be more. You just have to be more open, truly
Mm.
open, an open type of person, and you have to build a model that has space for that level of transparency.
And so I always grapple with this, and people that I coached grapple with this too. It's like there's openness, and there's sort of professional openness, and then there's hot mess. And
Right.
how do and I actually have clients I think hot mess works really well for. I don't think it works for me as a coach, but how do people think about sort of transparency, openness, professionalism, hot mess?
Yeah. So I would say that as you try to cultivate a voice, you really want to make sure that you focus on the topics that matter the most for you and are related to the niche audiences that you really want to be a thought leader within. I think that type of a positioning is not really a hot mess type of positioning. It's more of a professional voice. Now, that being said, leaders that have these moments where they have real examples of human problems and weakness, etc., and they're able to communicate that effectively, it's amazing. I mean, it's an extremely cathartic thing that just even a generation ago would just have been impossible. Like, if you'd had a breakdown, I'm Gen X, and if my peers or my bosses had done that, that would have been the end of their careers, full stop.
Yep.
And I would say the beauty of the millennial generation and Generation Z is that they're demanding a more holistic professional model. They're demanding that we understand the full self and that we build a work environment that reflects that full self. And I think it's only a good thing. I mean, we can only learn from them. We complain about it sometimes because we're tough and we're cool and we think we're so great. But the reality is they're right. They're spot
Yeah, I
on. And
agree.
we just need to listen to them.
And then I always like to talk about things um like gender and orientation and race. Like I like to think about, I'm part of the queer community, and
Mhm.
I want that to be part of my brand, but I don't want it to be the only part of my brand. I don't want it to overtake my brand. And I guess I'm curious how you think, how do we weigh in on challenges for women in your voice? Like those things happen all the time, but where do we think about that in terms of
Yeah. I
education?
mean, we
Yeah.
always talk about that we generally recommend every one of our clients to have 1 to 3 pillars that they're talking about, and
Mhm,
so that may be a passion area for you to highlight,
mhm,
something that's been important or is important to your life, and playing a role in the transformation of
mhm.
how those issues are perceived needs to be highlighted. And so I absolutely would champion those causes and you would make that part of your voice. It just might not be your only voice.
I
And
don't want it to be
right.
my only
Yeah.
voice.
And then,
Yeah.
if you, what you'll notice is on a lot of platforms today, the platforms are now asking for you to place your pronouns that you want to be known as. So I would say that you can make a statement in that regard there, and I would say it's the pronoun thing is really more of an American thing still right now,
Canadians
but
like it a lot too.
yeah, Canadians
Like
as
for
well,
Canadians. Yeah.
yeah, but you know I've listed the pronouns, and when I'm in Europe, they're like, "What? What are you doing?" They don't really understand, but
Yeah.
that can be a good thing because then it can lead to a conversation if it's a passion point that you might want to have.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's interesting. Although I don't always like in groups asking for people's pronouns because that may out somebody who isn't ready to reveal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, society and the way we're talking is constantly shifting. Um, I think that we're going to continue to see those types of areas discussed, and they're going to move in one direction. They'll probably shift back in another direction.
Mhm.
It's the same way that it's always been. It just requires us always to be on top of it. So.
I have another question for you because, it's the Experimental Leader podcast, and I like to talk about data collection
Mhm.
a little bit. And marketing has great data usually because what's happening when you do something, you're tracking that, or you should be looking at those things. How do we think about that in terms of reputation management? Is there any sort of experimentation, or how do we know if our brand voice reputation is working?
It's a good question. When we started, my another one of kind of probably my big pillars is privacy. For some people that might seem ironic for somebody who manages online presence activity, but I'm an extremely private person, and I would say that I really am a champion of privacy for the individual. And so I would say that our philosophy was that we want to make sure that you control your data as much as possible, you control your
Mhm.
footprint as much as possible. And so one of the big things for us is we really want to advocate for our clients to take control of their online presence, take control of the different channels where they could have control over their name and things like that. That's really important. In terms of the data that's collected by different groups, you know, the data rules and laws are changing quickly. I think, Apple's recent decisions are having a huge impact on the advertising and marketing industry. If you look at Facebook's Q4 results, they highlighted in, their going forward message was that they're going to lose something like, I want to say it was like $1 billion or $10 billion, because some huge number, because the way that the iPhone privacy restrictions work, they just won't be able to target their ads in the same way.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, going to be a lesson we're going to go through, and it kind of ultimately leads to a good place, which is, I am willing to give my data up for things that I want.
Yeah.
Like, and it should be an exchange of value. It should be a real exchange of value. It shouldn't be a secretive exchange of value. It shouldn't be that Facebook is my broker and I don't know that I made that exchange of value. It needs to be a transparent exchange of value. And so I think, I get very excited by business models that allow for, individuals to have a much more open discussion about that exchange of value based on their data. And so, we'll see how that goes. But as the world becomes more sophisticated in their understanding of technology, I can only imagine that consumers will demand more control over that.
I think that's really interesting, and interesting to hear from you as someone who's been in this space for a long time. Where can people find you?
I'm everywhere. You can find me at Qnary.com, Qnary.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I also have a website, Bant Breen.com. Definitely email me at Bant, BANT, at Qnary.com. And I'm happy I'll definitely get back to you.
And how should someone, who should reach out to you? Like, how would somebody know that, you were going to make their life so much better?
Well, I don't know how they would know exactly, but we work with companies and executives of all sizes, and I guess my one of the areas that we've been talking today about, Melanie, is this idea that people are going to look for people, and they're going to. So one of the things that's kind of funny is that when someone goes for a job, there's so much focus on, well, the company needs to prepare for, making sure that they look good, and they talk about their culture. Well, I would say, what? That person that's going to interview is going to look at your profile. They're going to look at who you are, because your values, your beliefs, your presence, your voice matters to them. And I've had the opposite happen too, which is people coming into our own company for jobs as social media strategists or something like that. And we look at their online presence and we're like, why does he think he's a social, he doesn't even have an Instagram page, or, so like there's little things like that are just obvious, right?
Yeah. I had a 16-year-old high school kid reach out to me, to do digital marketing. And I, sent me a direct message on Facebook, and I looked at his profile. No, just no. Like,
yeah,
I
agree.
You aren't a grown-up, and you haven't even managed to look like one online.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's going to become more important to people going forward. And what we're seeing is it's becoming more important to enterprises, because let's say you're a big company and you want to change the focus of the business. I don't want to use Facebook as another example again, but I mean, I don't know if Facebook will be successful in this change, but they're trying to make probably one of the biggest changes ever of a company their size, to go from being essentially a social platform to being the gateway to your digital identity in a digital form, and that's a huge shift. I mean, they got to figure out how they're going to message that and communicate that, right?
Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time and all of your generous comments and suggestions and help.
Thank you. It's been really great to talk.
Cool. Well, that was so interesting. I love getting to talk to Bant Breen. He was fantastic. And I love this idea of curating your presence online. I also like the idea of, picking 3 things that you can focus on, so that you're not trying to be all things. It's part of that personal brand, leadership brand. Who are you? What do you want to move in the world? What's your vision of a world, a perfect world? And how do you comment on that? So my challenge to you this week is to take a minute, think of the 3 things you want to move in the world, and make some notes for yourself. Figure out how that's going to be a part of the way that you manage your professional brand and your reputation, and go experiment.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more about working with Melanie, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.